The GOP taps into business leaders to spur job growth. And lawmakers fish for answers to prevent invasive carp. Details in Capitol Report. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's Capitol Report. I'm Julie Bartkey. Job creation. It's a message that continues to resonate even during the interim. Chair of the Jobs and Economic Growth Committee, Senator Geoff Michel, recently began touring the state to gain insight on the issue from business leaders. This coincides with study results that indicate business leaders are tepid about the business climate in the state. The Minnesota Chamber of Commerce co-sponsored the Minnesota Business Barometer Survey. It finds 74% of respondents identify taxes as the leading barrier in job creation. Regulation came in second. When asked to identify the best job creation strategy, 90% responded policymakers should focus on improving the overall business climate, not on specific industry incentives. Here to talk a little bit about that survey, we have Senator Geoff Michel. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi.
Hi. Let's begin with the survey. It's the 8th annual. It's co-sponsored by the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, and it was conducted recently, just in July. And essentially, the broad conclusion is that employers recommend that policymakers, when looking for recession-ending strategies, take steps to improve the overall business climate rather than providing incentives for specific industries. What do you think of that?
You know, that rings pretty true to me. I think government at all levels does a poor job when we try to pick winners. Instead of picking a company or an industry, our job as policymakers is to make this the best place to start and grow a business. Any kind of business. Maybe not any kind of business. We could probably think of a few we don't want here, but I think we would be best served to spend our time, and that's certainly what we're trying to do in the Senate Jobs Committee, by looking at overall tax structure, overall regulatory levels, and then talking to job creators. What can we do to help you? And get out of the picking winner or loser business. So that business barometer makes a lot of sense to me.
And you've been talking with job creators. Recently you were in St. Cloud. You've been touring the state, trying to get some ideas on how to grow private sector business and jobs. What have you been hearing so far?
Yeah, you know, we're kind of looking at this fall interim as a time for some road trips, and it's nice to get out of the Capitol. It's nice to get out of St. Paul. We spent part of last week up in St. Cloud. And what we want to focus on is, you know, we've got this battle in St. Paul and also in Washington, D.C. over taxes and spending. That's going to continue. We've got an election coming up, a campaign season coming up. But before we get into that full-fledged campaign season, we want to add a third topic. So yes, taxes, yes, spending, but we want to talk about growth. What can we do to help private sector job growth in the state of Minnesota? What can what can we do in Minnesota to make this the best place to start a business? And so the first thing you got to do is actually talk to job creators. You have to talk to these risk takers. And so what we're hearing is our taxes are still pretty high. And I'd say the bulk of the discussion from small businesses has been, help us with a little regulatory relief. When we're applying for a permit, when we're trying to get a license from government, sometimes it just sits in the inbox. And so we need a regulatory system in Minnesota that fits the pace of a 21st century economy.
Any aha moments, anything that you've heard that maybe is a bit out of the weeds, something that kind of caught you by surprise?
I don't know if I can say there's been a big aha moment, but I'd say the bulk of the, maybe I'd call it critique, has been on the regulatory side. Some people have asked for a moratorium, just time out government, don't do anything more to us. And I've also heard a lot of support for a repeal of the statewide business property tax. So no matter what size of a business you are, whether you are making profits or more likely in this kind of economy, you know, you're looking at a flat bottom line to maybe losing some money, everyone has to pay their property taxes. A lot of people don't know that there's actually a statewide business property tax that we throw on top of all the other property taxes. We can eliminate that. We actually offered that, put that on the governor's desk, and he vetoed it. So we want to take another run at that. We've got to do some bold things that help to plant a flag at the state border that says, we're open for business. We're open for business. We got to compete with 49 other states. Now we got to compete with other countries in a global economy.
And as you look to create jobs, the GOP argument thus far has been to grow private sector jobs and not public, while the upcoming session is, of course, a bonding session. So would you consider a larger bonding bill in order to pull in more employment, higher employment numbers, particularly in the construction trade?
Yeah, I guess my challenge to you, Julie, or to the governor, thinking that that'll probably be one of his proposals, is, well, can you put a number of jobs on that bill? In other words, if we have a big bonding bill, what does that create? I think we've got a legislature that's pretty skeptical now about going into further debt. We're giving too much debt and too many deficits to our kids. What we need to do is give them a thriving private sector that offers them careers and opportunities. And so I don't think a bonding bill does that. Yes, historically it's a bonding year, but as you know, we passed a pretty big bonding bill in July as part of the special session. So I wouldn't look for a particularly big bonding bill, and for those who claim that it is a jobs solution, I think we'll have some pretty tough questions.
So we'll watch for that debate next session.
You keep watching.
In just a few moments on this program, we'll be talking with Representative Paul Marquart. He and Representative Ann Linczewski introduced the other day their intention to pass legislation that would essentially bring back the Homestead Tax Credit, which was eliminated last session during the special session. Representative Marquart calls this the big sleeper issue to come out of the session, especially as he's door knocking and speaking with homeowners. Would you agree?
Well, I wouldn't, and I'd suggest if a proposal is going to be serious in the year 2012, it should be bipartisan, and my understanding is that was a House DFL press conference, and we know the typical status quo DFL playbook is to talk about property taxes. That's fine. Again, I'd go back to, I hope we can work with Representative Marquart and Representative Linczewski on eliminating a statewide business property tax. Let's help the economy. Let's help job creators. Let's give people a reason to choose Minnesota. So I don't think private sector job creation should be a partisan issue, and we'll keep looking for ways to work with the governor and his administration and even those House DFLers.
Are you, I'm just trying to cross some T's and dot some I's here, are you then saying that perhaps this is an area of negotiation, that maybe the GOP would be willing to reconsider reinstating this program if repealing the business property tax is something the DFL would do too?
I would love to have the final deal just negotiated right here at this table.
Me too.
It's a little early for you, Julie, but I think the topic of taxes is definitely on the table. The topic of tax reform. Again, we've got kind of a 1960s state government, how we deliver our services, how we collect our taxes, and we've got a 21st century economy where Minnesota's not winning right now. So if there's things we can do within the tax system to help Minnesota job creators, I think you'll find a lot of cheering for that within the Minnesota State Senate.
All right, I think we're going to be following a lot of policy discussion next session.
Look forward to it.
Thank you, Senator Michel. We appreciate your time.
Thanks.
The House DFL tax leaders have come forward to try and reinstate a long-standing tax credit for homeowners. Minnesotans with homes valued at less than $414,000 have been able to claim a homestead tax credit. That program was eliminated last session. Representatives Ann Linczewski and Paul Marquart contend that it needs to be reinstated.
The homestead credit is a credit that 95% of Minnesota residents receive. I mean, that's a pretty astounding number. 95% of Minnesota homeowners get this credit. This isn't a small thing, it's not a special thing, it's not a unique thing. 95% of homeowners receive a homestead credit until last session when it was permanently eliminated. We're aware that a lot of people do not seem to understand what this is, what happened to it, why, and we're getting a lot of questions about it. And as this process begins now from September to December, as we go through the whole levying process for cities, counties, and school districts, we think across the state more and more people, and we've been reading your stories, so we know you're already on it, are going to really start getting angrier and angrier when they realize their homestead credit's gone. And it's not gone temporarily, it's gone permanently. So we are attempting to bring the homestead credit back.
We have to look at the question. If you ask someone, would you like to have your homestead credit eliminated, Or would you like us to take a look at those loopholes that foreign operating corporations have? I think that's the debate, the discussion we need to have that we did not have before. As we all know, since 2002, property taxes have gone up almost $4 billion. It's regressive. We continue to shoulder our balancing budget act on the backs of folks back home, our senior citizens on fixed incomes, our families, our farmers, our small businesses. So, property tax increases are the worst way to go, and this would provide over $200 million of property tax relief from current law.
We caught up with Representative Marquart immediately following the news conference to discuss further his legislation. Now let's begin with, when was the homestead credit even put into place, and who was it intended to help?
Well, it first came about in 1967. So this is an incentive for home ownership. It's to give folks who own their homes some sort of a tax benefit, some property tax benefit. So we have enjoyed this for over 4 decades in the state of Minnesota.
Okay, I want to ask you now, you had discussed briefly some of the effects of the elimination of this program on school districts, cities, counties, and rural homeowners. Go into a bit more detail without getting too into the weeds on what those effects are.
The market value homestead credit is based on the value of your home. And typically, the lower the value of your home, the more benefit you get, the more of the credit you get. And it phases out when a home goes over about $414,000. So for rural Minnesota, where we have lower valued homes, this really hits hard. For example, only 35% of all the market values of homes are in rural Minnesota, yet we receive 55% of the homestead credit. And when you look at the data that shows the huge property tax increases the elimination of this homestead credit will provide, that's about 57% will hit rural Minnesota. So it's a huge, huge property tax increase for rural Minnesota.
And let's talk about the bottom line then to school districts, cities, and counties because of this.
Well, the bottom line is, according to independent research, that even if cities and counties and school districts hold their levies flat, not one dime of increase, you'll see an increase around the state of $268 million of property taxes. And when you break that down, it hits homeowners over $100 million of increase, businesses over $70 million, agricultural land increase of over $37 million. So that's, a lot of people say, well, the state does this, but it's really the local units of government that sets the property tax levy. And so if you have any property tax increase, blame it on those local folks. Well, in this case, even if they keep their levies flat with the year before, there will be huge property tax increases in these communities.
And you open the door to my next question. Republicans do argue that property taxes are not a legislative state decision and they should be left to local governments. Do you buy into that argument?
Their hands are tied behind their backs this time around because costs go up. And so even if cities and counties decide, say, we're not going to do any inflation, we're just going to hold the line as the year before, and you know how difficult that is, their property taxes will go up by whatever they're losing in market value homestead credit. Because what it is, you're looking at over $500 million of homestead credit that now cities are not going to receive to make up for the homeowners' reduction. And so that's going to create huge property tax increases in these communities.
And Representative, you mentioned earlier that you have been outdoor knocking quite a bit. Are people aware that their property taxes are going to go up and that this is partially the reason?
What they understand is that they have had this homestead credit for over 40 years. And it is a line item on your property tax statement, market value homestead credit. And right now, as cities and counties are beginning to wrestle with this, and one city manager told me this is the big sleeper. This is the big sleeper issue. As press reports are talking about how cities and counties are handling this, and they're talking about this elimination of the homestead credit, folks have been asking me every single night, several times a night, about, what does this mean? And when it's explained to them, they are not very happy. They are quite upset and wondering why the state would take away this cherished and valued homestead benefit that we've enjoyed for over 4 decades in this state.
In the news conference you did discuss, we talked briefly that the legislature passed this. The governor has indicated he supports this program. So if you restore it as intended next session, how do you intend to pay for it?
I think the most important thing is we have to have a debate, which we did not have this time. If someone would have asked a homeowner, do you want me to eliminate your homestead credit, or would you like me to look at closing loopholes for foreign operating corporations, I think we would have had a whole different discussion. I mean, everyone's going to have their ideas. It could be cuts, it could be some increases, could be closing loopholes on tax expenditures. But the important thing is the debate has to start now. We have to figure out how we're going to get this homestead credit back to folks back home. I mean, the main reason I'm introducing this bill, along with Representative Lincheski today and others, is to give homeowners back their homestead credit.
Do you think you can get some GOP support to back this?
I think we will. And I think as this issue goes out, it's statewide, 95% of all homeowners receive this credit, and in rural Minnesota, even a higher percent. And as this gets out and about, and I think the real repercussions of what happened here, I think you're going to see Democrats being joined by Republicans on this bill.
And so given that, let me go a step further, and let's work under the assumption there's enough support to pass a bill. Would you look to fully restore it, or would you be willing to work with the numbers a bit to even give some kind of partial relief?
I think first you completely restore it. I mean, there wasn't enough debate on this. If we're looking at trying to change a program, what we have to make sure is that we don't raise property taxes on people as we try to do something. So I think we should totally bring it back, totally give back the homestead credit to homeowners, and then we can look at things. I was property tax chair for 4 years, and we looked at the homestead credit. What we realize is this is a very important direct relief to homeowners, and any way you tried to slice or dice it, you lead to direct property tax increases on homeowners. And so we've got to really debate this, look at this, but right now what's important is that we have to make sure now and into the long term that we have a homeowner's benefit like the homestead credit for people to enjoy and keep property taxes down. That's what's important here.
Okay, Representative Paul Marquart, we're out of time. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much.
About 40 people from a variety of government agencies met to discuss the problem of Asian carp infiltrating Minnesota waters. The meeting was called by Governor Mark Dayton to gain insight on formulating a plan to protect Minnesota waters from the invasive fish.
We are the stewards now of these priceless resources, and it's our responsibility to do everything within our power to preserve them and enhance them for our own enjoyment and that of our fellow citizens and use, but just as much so, perhaps in some respects even more so, for the generations to follow.
The challenge with this beast is we've not got much history with it. We have a very limited amount of research with it. Much of the research that's been done has been done in systems other than what we've got in Minnesota. We can continue to think about this and talk about this and meet about this and ponder about this, and every minute those fish will be getting closer and closer. So we sort of have to take some risks here. We have to be willing to say, okay, we're going to be on the bleeding edge, and we're going to do some things that in the long term we might look back and say this wasn't the smartest thing, but it is the best thing we've got at the time.
If we looked at this as a disease, we would be taking some immediate action. And when you take immediate action, there are going to be some people that are not going to like the consequences. But the leadership that's needed is going to require taking some action that maybe cannot wait 1 or 2 or 3 years for a stakeholder consensus.
Representative Hansen mentioned earlier on an encouragement for a more comprehensive approach. And although we're talking about specifically Minnesota waterways, I would encourage you to have a very significant footnote with regard to the Great Lakes. Mm-hmm. We do know that there is a threat in Lake Michigan, and because of the reversal in Chicago, and the Asian carp, I don't think it's too far-fetched to say they could be coming from a different direction.
Here to talk more about the Asian carp infiltration. We have the Commissioner of the Department of Natural Resources, Tom Landwehr. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Commissioner, let's begin with this invasion of Asian carp. How close are they coming to Minnesota waterways?
Well, Asian carp have been approaching Minnesota for a long time. In fact, we have documented fish in the Mississippi River for a decade now. It's important to note that there are 4 species of Asian carp. We're concerned about 3 of them: the silver carp, the black carp, and the bighead carp. The silver carp and the bighead carp have been documented in the Mississippi River close to Minnesota. And so we're very concerned about that. The most recent developments are that we found a bighead carp, a commercial fisherman caught a bighead carp at the mouth of the St. Croix River near Prescott earlier this summer. And we initiated some testing called environmental DNA or eDNA testing in the St. Croix River and in the Mississippi River in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. Had a number of positive tests in the St. Croix River all the way up to St. Croix Falls for silver carp. Silver carp are the one that you see jumping in the video clips. It's very alarming for recreational boaters. And 44% of our samples tested positive for silver carp. So the information suggests that we have some presence of fish. The eDNA testing won't tell us how many, won't tell us how severe it is, but it suggests that there are silver carp in the St. Croix River. We followed that testing up with netting and hired commercial netters who do this for a living to tell us what they would find. They came up with no additional samples. So the good news is we don't believe there's a big population of any of these carp right now in the Mississippi or St. Croix rivers. But the bad news is there is some evidence that they're here. We know that they're further downstream. They will work their way upstream. We have a window of opportunity perhaps to do what we can to deter them.
And using that window of opportunity, are there any effective means known to work at this time that can be employed in Minnesota?
The only 100% effective way to stop Asian carp from moving upstream is a physical barrier that provides at least 10 feet or more of drop. They can jump, you've seen the videos, they can jump 4, 5, 6 feet high, but they can't jump 10 feet high, they can't jump 20 feet high. If we could put a physical barrier in place that provides that amount of elevation, that will be a complete barrier. Unfortunately, the number of opportunities for that type of a barrier in Minnesota on the St. Croix or the Mississippi are very limited. In the St. Croix, we have a natural barrier at St. Croix Falls, which provides that. In the Mississippi, we have a natural barrier that provides that at St. Anthony Falls. But of course, at St. Anthony Falls, we have put in a lock and dam system that helps bridge that divide. So right now, we don't have physical barriers that do that in the places we want them. We're looking at some options. We will be improving the Coon Rapids Dam via some bonding money the legislature gave us last session that will be a mostly effective barrier at Coon Rapids. And we're looking at a sonic and bubbler barrier at the mouth of St. Croix River in Prescott that can help deter Asian carp migration, but it won't stop them completely. So we had a meeting earlier this week, as you know, with several agency heads, federal agency heads, and the congressional delegation to talk about one preferred option, which is to make the St. Anthony Falls Dam a more effective barrier for Asian carp. And that's one of the things we see in the short term as being one of our more viable solutions to keep fish from moving up the river.
And the state is asking Congress permission to close some locks and dams. And so if this happens, who will be affected, both geographically and economically?
Well, the Corps of Engineers runs this large lock and dam system that runs from Minnesota to Missouri, and it is intended to allow for boat traffic, both recreational and commercial, to go up the river where ordinarily they would be stopped by a falls or some other navigational obstacle. In the Twin Cities area, there are 2 locks and dams north of Hastings. One is the Ford Dam. People know there's a Ford Dam in St. Paul. The other is St. Anthony Falls Dam in downtown Minneapolis. Those are both managed by the Corps of Engineers. Both are used for facilitating boat traffic up and down the river. It requires essentially an act of Congress to close those dams for any purpose, any emergency purpose. And right now the Corps of Engineers does not have that authority. So you're correct, we're going to go to Congress and ask them for that authority. If they in fact did close a lock and dam to avoid allowing the migration of fish, The impact will be that there are there is some barge traffic that goes through those locks and dams. It's very limited. It doesn't go much above the St. Anthony Falls lock into Minneapolis, but there's recreational boating as well. Pleasure boating. There's some commercial sightseeing boats that go up and down through there. Obviously, if you close that lock for some period of time, that lock and dam for some period of time, neither the commercial traffic nor the recreational traffic can move through there until we can perhaps retrofit the lock and dam to make it an effective barrier, but still allow some passage.
So, Commissioner, how much is the DNR willing to spend on this issue, both in time and in resources?
Well, this is a really important issue for the Department of Natural Resources. We are the land of 10,000 lakes, and if Asian carp get into our river systems, they are impossible to get out. Our best defense is to keep them from getting there in the first place. Of course, all of our authority, all of our funding comes from the legislature. So the real question is, what is the state of Minnesota willing to spend on this challenge? And we will be we did get some funding the last session for aquatic invasive species from the legislature. We'll be going back with additional requests for funding for that sonic bubble barrier I mentioned, as well as perhaps some additional authorities. Right now, we're going to do everything we can within our authority and within the dollars we've got to prevent the migration of Asian carp. But more importantly, or perhaps equally importantly, we're going to our federal partners, because this truly is a federal issue as well as a state issue. These critters are crossing multiple state jurisdictions. The Corps of Engineers, as the administrator of the lock and dam system, is a key partner in this, and so we need to be in lockstep with the federal agencies, with the state of Wisconsin, other states, and our own legislative delegation.
Okay, Commissioner, for my last question, I'd like to switch gears. The last time you were on this program, it was before we knew whether or not there would be a state government shutdown. Now that everything is back and fully operational, have you been able to assess the impacts to your department of this shutdown?
We're still pulling the numbers together. We obviously lost revenue. You know, we had fewer people camping in parks, we had fewer people buying fishing licenses, but some of that loss is offset by we didn't have people working, so we weren't paying them. Some of the people who didn't buy a fishing license may buy it now, even if they weren't able to use it in July. So it'll take a while to get those numbers, because we compile by quarterly process. So it'll take a while to come up with the specific cost to the state. But during the shutdown, we were losing $1.2 million a week in license revenue and $1 million a week in park revenue. So the total loss of revenue is about $6 million. We don't know what the savings were, and that's what we're going to be calculating, but that will be, that's the range of our total impact.
Okay, we are out of time, unfortunately, but Commissioner, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Well, again, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
The recent passing of Senator Linda Scheid and the resignation of Senator Linda Berglund resulted in 2 vacant seats in the Minnesota Senate. These are the candidates who will be on the ballot in October, following a special primary election on September 13th. That concludes this week's program. From all of us at Senate Media Services, I'm Julie Bartkey. Thank you for watching Capitol Report.